Okay, we know science is studying the world around us, asking questions, trying to find answers. And in this class, biology, we are studying living things. But from all scientists, from all sciences, there have been some processes that scientists go through. So scientific processes can lead to something called the scientific method. Scientists don't sit down and say, what's the first step of the scientific method? I need to do that first. And then what's the second step to the scientific method? They just automatically go through all these processes, and in the end, they've done the scientific method. In science, whether it's biology, chemistry, environmental, planet Earth, you are always observing and asking questions. There always is some question out there trying to be answered. For example, why did my plants in the front yard grow taller than my plants in the backyard? Why did I get an A in algebra but not in U.S. history? Okay, so you ask a question. Well, now you need to find the answer. So that's where inferring and forming a hypothesis comes into play. So I think my plants in the front yard grew taller because they got more sun than my plants in the backyard. Or I think I got an A in algebra because I did all of my homework in algebra and I did not do all of my homework in U.S. history. Well, then at this point, you need to run an experiment to see if your hypothesis is accurate. And in science, when you run experiments, you always have your independent variable and your dependent variable. You need to have a control group and an experimental group. So within the control group and experimental group, there are variables. The independent variable, independent, it does not depend on, okay, is the cause. It's going to cause something to happen. We think it's the cause. The dependent variable is the effect of that cause. I'll give you an example. So with the hypothesis, I think my plants in the front yard grew taller because they got more sun than my plants in the backyard. Okay, what do I think is going to cause something to happen? Well, I think it's the sun. I think the sun is going to cause my plants to grow. So the independent variable is the sun. The dependent variable, well, what is the effect of that sun? Growth of my plants. Cause, effect. In my second hypothesis, I think I got an A in algebra because I did all of my homework, but I did not do my homework in U.S. history. Okay, what do I think is going to cause something to happen? Doing homework. What's the effect of that? The effect of doing homework? Getting an A. Well, like I mentioned, all experiments have to have the control group versus the experimental group. So the control group is kind of we have the experimental group, which has the variable that's being tested. So in my plant scenario, my experimental group, I think sun is going to cause my plants to grow taller. So my experimental group is the plants that get the sun. The control group would be the group that gets less sun. My experimental group with the history and algebra classes, I said I think I got an A in algebra because I did my homework. Okay, well, my algebra is my experimental group, and my control group would be the U.S. history. Okay, so all experiments have a control group versus experimental group. You can't just run an experiment and say my plants in the front yard grew taller because they got more sun than my plants in the backyard, and just looked at the front yard and never compared it to the backyard. You have to have comparisons groups. You have to see how accurate you are. And in the process of this, you automatically are forming independent and dependent variables. And we're going to practice some of this in class. All scientists, usually there's measuring and organizing your data. So if you're the plant scenario, you're going to measure the height every day for maybe 2 weeks. And then you organize it in a nice chart and you may make a graph. In the school one, you're not really measuring anything, but you'd organize your data. You'd get your print out from PowerSchool of all the homework for both classes. You would tally how much homework you did in Algebra 1 versus the U.S. history, and you may make a table from that. So you're organizing your data. Collecting and analyzing data. So as you're going on, as the experiment's going on, you're going to be collecting the data. Your collecting would be measuring the plants, getting that information in, and then when you're done, you analyze it, and then you actually draw the conclusions. And then if you were a professor at a university, you would communicate these findings to everyone so that everyone around the world knew what you found. So again, these scientific processes can lead to using the scientific method. And I'm not going to make you memorize the scientific method, or I'm not going to make you memorize these processes. You just need to understand that scientists use these things. And measuring is a very important scientific process. And we will be taking some time to learn how to do conversions. Metric conversions are very important, especially next year when you'll be taking chemistry. So I do have another lecture about metric conversions, and we'll be doing a conversion lab. Now, a lot of times, there's like a lot of hypotheses that are very, very similar to each other, and from those, scientists have came up with theories. Scientific theories are not hypotheses. A theory is a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations and hypotheses that allow scientists to make accurate prediction about new situations. In our everyday lives, we use the word theory really incorrectly. It means more like a hypothesis. Like you may have a theory on who's going to win the Super Bowl. You may have a theory on what grade you're going to get. But really, it's a hypothesis. It's an educated guess. Theories stand up over time. They have been tested over and over again, and they have facts to back it up. Okay, another quick review. So scientific processes lead to the scientific method. Scientists observe and they ask questions. From the question, they form a hypothesis. Hypotheses usually start with I think, or maybe if this happens, then this will happen. They're if-then statements. From the hypothesis, you make an experiment. The experiment will have an independent variable and a dependent variable. The experiment will have the control group versus the experimental group. The experimental group is what you are experimenting for. If you're experimenting for the growth of the plants because it got sun, it better have sun. If you're experimenting and you think plants that get fertilizer A will grow taller than if they don't have fertilizer A, you're experimenting for fertilizer A. Those plants better be in your experimental group. The control group does not have that variable. It leaves it out. Scientists measure using the metric system. They organize their data, putting it into charts, tables, or graphs. As the experiment's going on, they are collecting data, and they're analyzing it. After they've collected and analyzed it, then they can draw conclusions about their data, and then they can communicate that with other people. And you have your scientific theories, which are not hypotheses. Theories have been stood up under time, and there is lots of facts to support the theories.